Okie dokes. So good morning, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the Positive Youth Development Magic of 4-H webinar. This is part of our Leader Learning series that we're offering for, well, mostly 2024. We had one session in October in 2023 on the community gaming grants. And there is a link on our YouTube channel for that as well. So if you want to check that out, you're welcome to. We have a couple more sessions coming up as well. And I know a lot of you are already registered for those ones, but do check them out on the 4HBC website if you're interested and you want to learn more. We always try and provide lots of educational opportunities for our 4-H leaders. So my name is Lauren Bernardi. For those of you that I haven't met yet in person, I work as a youth development specialist with the Ministry of Agriculture and Food out of Abbotsford on the traditional and unceded territories of the Stalo First Nations. So that is where I'm calling from today. Very happy to be here with our 4-H Canada guests. So we have both Leslie Noble and we also have Catherine Miller-Mort with us as well. So yeah, happy to have them here. I'm going to pass it over to Leslie to give an introduction and get things rolling. I will just note here, and Leslie may say it as well, we'll have the chat box open and I'll be monitoring the questions throughout the session. So feel free, if you have questions and you don't want to forget them, until the end of the session, feel free to put them in there and I'll make sure that Leslie gets those. All right, Leslie, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Lauren. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you are happy to be in the province of Ontario like I am. First of all, can I just say it is amazing to see like the diversity of clothing happening in BC, from hoodies and toques right through to Shannon is rocking that tank top. I love that it is like all kinds of weather and warmth in your houses on this Saturday morning. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Leslie Noble. I'm the program director at 4-H Canada. I don't want to spend a lot of time on myself because I find that really awkward. But just a quick snippet. I've been with 4-H Canada for just over 3 years now and in the program director role for about a year and a half. I am a 4-H Ontario alumni. And really never thought that as a youth, my career would bring me back to 4-H, but I'm super honored to be working for the organization and really excited to share more about positive youth development with all of you today. I apologize if my gaze moves to the side. I'm working 2 screens here. So if I'm not looking straight on, I'm probably just checking something on my other screen. And thank you, Lauren, for helping me monitor the chat. I'm going to go ahead in just 2 seconds here and share my screen. So what we're going to talk about today is positive youth development. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of positive youth development, just so that it gives it some context and you understand why positive youth development, or PYD, is so important. We're going to spend some time taking a look at the 4-H Canada PYD formula, or you may have heard it referred to as the honeycomb formula, as well as the 4-H thriving model. We're going to watch a quick video, and then we're going to do an activity to align these 2 things. Then we're going to spend some time looking at the developmental context, spend some time having another discussion, and then we'll take some time to reflect on our learning today. So 4-H is absolutely filled with positive, with magical impact stories of how the program works in the lives of the youth that we work with. I'm sure if you think for a minute, you can probably quite quickly come up with one of those stories of youth who come to 4-H and to the program around the age 6, 7, 8. They're shy, they're nervous about being in a group. They might be really anxious about what they've gotten themselves into and participating. But then something magic happens. And by the time they leave club programming around the age of 21, They're leaders in their community. They're comfortable speaking in groups and in public. And they're empathetic and care for others. And they take initiative to create positive action in their communities and the world around them. 4-H works this magic in the lives of young people, but why exactly is that? Well, there's two parts of scientific evidence in the area of youth development and developmental science that help us explain why young people are so magically transformed and impacted in programs like 4-H. So what is positive youth development, or PYD? And you'll hear me use both of these terms throughout our time together today. Positive youth development is a theory that can be researched and is supported by science. PYD is a philosophical approach. 4-H programming is designed and delivered in ways that are based in this PYD theory. We see this in practice when we have 4-H, sorry, let me start that again. We see this in practice that we have in 4-H, such as our strength-based approach to delivering programming. And this is the approach where we focus on building positive strengths in youth, and we see youth as holding assets when they come to us in 4-H or as they live their lives. And we spend our time building those strengths that youth have. The reverse would be a deficits approach where we're focused on the problems that youth have. And that's not what we do in 4-H. We see that youth have these assets and that we have an opportunity to further develop them. Our strength-based approach is rooted in research that says every young person has the ability and capacity to be developed given the right set of circumstances, supports, and opportunities in their life. PYD is an intentional practice of youth development programs. And intention is really important. And you're going to hear me again come back and really emphasize the importance of intention this afternoon, but today. I mentioned that PYD is a strength-based approach to youth development. There's an individual, her name is Karen Pittman, and she's a leader who's been at the forefront of youth development for almost 50 years as a champion of a whole child approach to learning. And she said that problem-free is not fully prepared. Problem-free is not fully prepared. If we think about that for a minute, that's really quite eye-opening. And her statement when she made it was really important because it made individuals aware of the fact that just because a youth doesn't have problems, or if programs are simply solving the problems that youth have in their lives, that doesn't mean that they're prepared for what is going to come to them in life and that they're going to have the opportunity to thrive. So her statement added to our understanding that if we're not building assets and capacity in youth, we're really not preparing them for their adult life. PYD helps us align the strengths of youth with the people and the resources in the community to help them to continue to build on those strengths that they have, as well as providing them with additional opportunities and pathways that they may not have been aware of before. Work by Peter Benson and others at the Search Institute added to what Karen Pittman was saying in her work when they said that every young person has the capacity to grow and thrive rather than is a problem to be solved. And again, this was a big shift in positive youth development since prior to some of these statements and some of the work of these individuals, research and programming focused a lot on the problems that youth had during that time in their life and how to help them solve and navigate those problems. When this research happened, then the area of positive youth development really started to shift to this more positive approach. One thing we do really great in 4-H is teen leadership development. And our goal here is to develop youth into competent leaders during those formative years. This is an intentional practice that 4-H has based on a PYD approach that says every young person has the ability and capacity to be developed, again, based on having the right circumstances, supports, and opportunities in their life to develop. We see 4-H's PYD success when teen youth develop those leadership skills. 4-H is that right set of circumstances for many young people. And through 4-H, they're able to access those supports and opportunities to develop and to thrive. PYD is a very comprehensive approach to programming, learning, and development. So we're looking at a youth from a holistic perspective, not just at one aspect of them. This approach ensures that 4-H programs have positive, measurable impact on the social, emotional, behavior, and cognitive development of youth. PYD is a leave nothing to chance approach. Intentionality is key in what we do and in creating high quality settings that promote optimal development for young people. And it's this philosophical approach to youth development put into action through research-based models that shine the light on the magic of 4-H. So just to recap, because I know that was a lot of information in a really short amount of time. So this is just a quick recap. So PYD is a theory of youth, is a theory of youth development. It's why the magic of 4-H works. It's a philosophical approach to youth development, which is how the 4-H magic works. And it's an intentional practice of youth development. And it's how we practice the magic of 4-H. So next, we're going to take a look at one model and one formula of positive youth development. The formula is the 4-H Canada PYD formula. You may have seen it and be familiar with it. And then we're going to also look at the 4-H Thriving model, which has come out of 4-H National in the United States. So to start, we're going to talk just for a minute about the difference between a model and a formula and why these even exist. So a model is something that predicts why something else happens. It's really easy to think of it in terms of an if-then statement. So if we do A, then B will happen. If we provide a seed with water, sunlight, soil, and nutrients, then the seed should grow. There was a study completed in the United States. It's called the National 4-H Study of Youth Development, and it was conducted by Richard Lerner at Tufts University in 2002. It was a longitudinal study, meaning that it took place over a number of years. In this case, it was 8 years. This piece of research is one of the key pieces of research looking at the developmental impact of 4-H programming. Now, what this study found was that if youth participate in high quality positive youth development programming that focused on their social, emotional, behavioral, and cognitive development, then youth developed 5 C's. And those 5 C's that they found were competence, confidence, character, caring, and connection. They found that these are, or they were able to determine that these are the outcomes that a youth gets by participating in PYD programming. The study also found that the more of these 5 C's that a youth develops, the more likely that they were to develop a desire to contribute. And this is often known as the 6th C. So the more of those first 5 C's that a youth has, the more likely to develop that desire to contribute, and that 6th C. What this tells us is that if we use a PYD approach in 4-H programming correctly, then these 6 C's are what young people are going to have when they leave our programs. And that's pretty amazing and pretty awesome. I definitely want to live in a world where we have adults who are competent, confident, they have a good sense of character, they're caring, they're connected, and they want to contribute. So what you see on the screen right now is the 4-H Canada PYD formula, also affectionately known as the honeycomb model. This is how 4-H Canada programming is designed to create and empower future generations of responsible, caring, and contributing leaders. Now, I want to be clear that this is a formula. It's not a model. So a formula is a list of ingredients that when added together should produce a desired result or outcome. So for example, we can think of this almost like a recipe, that if we put all these ingredients together, then the result should be responsible, caring, and contributing leaders. The PYD formula was created using all of that PYD research that we've talked about so far. So we can say that it's a research-based formula. However, it's not a model because it doesn't have that if-then approach, and it can't be scientifically tested the way a model can. In the case of the 4-H Canada PYD formula, it includes 2 different levels of ingredients. So we have that inner shape that in the lighter green, and then we have those darker green shapes around the outside. Our key ingredients in the center help 4-H members get to those outer assets in the darker green that we want them to develop, which eventually lead to the bottom group of words, the responsible, caring, and contributing leaders. So let's take a look at everything that's in this formula for a few minutes. In the center, we have identified our key elements. So safe, fun, and inclusive environment, caring adults, and of course, 4-H Canada's motto, learning to do by doing, which highlights our emphasis on an experiential educational approach. This is our do, reflect, apply process that clubs use in their programming. These 3 key elements are at the core of 4-H Canada's PYD formula to ensure that all members feel comfortable, are encouraged to participate in activities, that they feel supported and valued by the adults that are involved. They feel encouraged to try new things and apply their newly developed skills in their everyday lives. Surrounding that center shape, we have our 6 key assets that we're working to develop in youth. These 6 key assets, are based on Search Institute's list of 40 developmental assets. Those developmental assets from the Search Institute identify important assets that youth need to be successful in their life. That list of 40 includes 20 that are considered internal assets and 20 that are external assets. Our 4-H Canada PYD formula focuses on those internal assets and the ones that our programs support and develop the most. So these assets are personal skills, commitments and values youth need to make good choices, take responsibility for their own lives, and to be independent and become fulfilled. So rather than spending a lot of time talking in depth about what each of them are, I just want to give a high-level overview of what we're hoping that youth sort of feel and what we want youth saying when they're building that asset. So the first one is positive values. And here we want 4-H members to be saying, I feel more sure of my values and about acting on them or standing up for what I believe in. Responsibility. We want members to be saying, I feel better about accepting and taking personal responsibility for my actions. Skill mastery. We want members to be saying, I'm developing new skills and I'm strengthening old ones. Leadership development. Here, we'd like to hear, I can contribute my thoughts, ideas, and actions, and I can take the lead on various activities. Planning and decision-making. This is where we want to hear, I know how to plan ahead, make choices, and prioritize. And the last one is sense of purpose. And this is where we want to hear 4-H members saying, I feel that my life has purpose and I'm beginning to know what I want for my future. All of these assets work together. So we should never be focusing on one exclusively in all our programming. They might appear to different degrees depending on the type of programming that's happening, but it really is about a balanced approach so that youth are building their capacity and their skills in all of these areas. The 6 key assets are what 4-H in Canada strives to support through all of our programs and activities, providing youth with the confidence and the tools to collaborate, act, and advocate for what they believe in. What's the result or the outcome of all of this? Young people should leave our programs as responsible, caring, and contributing leaders, which is what's identified under the equal sign at the bottom of the image. Again, if you think about the youth that you've had the chance to work with, I'm sure you can think back to that magic taking place and those youth who leave our programs as responsible, caring, and contributing leaders, having been impacted by the 4-H magic. Okay, so I did mention that we would also talk about the 4-H thriving model. So this is something that's relatively new over the last few years that has come out of 4-H National in the United States. The 4-H Thriving Model is the work of Mary Arnold from Oregon State University. Mary is both a professor at the university as well as part of the university's extension program, and she has been involved in the extension program and 4-H for quite a long time. I really love kind of the origin story of the Thriving Model, so I just want to share that with you. That origin story or the history of how this kind of came to be kind of goes something like this. In 2013, Mary was part of the Governor's Youth Development Council in the state of Oregon. This council was responsible for deciding how that government funding was distributed to all of the youth development organizations in the state. So what the council had decided was they were going to enlist the help of a research firm, and they asked that research firm to do a little bit of work and find out and come back to them and share some evidence of every youth serving organization in the state so that they could determine how much funding each state or each program would get based on the evidence and the outcomes that youth were receiving from these various programs. So the firm came back to the group and they started going through their list of organizations, giving the evidence that they had found, and in that process they come to 4-H. Well, the researchers said, well, we couldn't find any evidence about what the impact of 4-H is on young people, but we know that they do good work. And the conversation shifted to the next program. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but in case you aren't, in the United States, 4-H is one of the oldest youth serving organizations. It's also the largest. It is connected to every land-grant university across the country, and it has a presence in almost every county or parish nationwide. Yet the researchers said we can find no evidence of what the outcomes of 4-H is. And as a researcher, Mary really sat back and thought, oh my goodness, how can this possibly be? How can it be possible that this huge gap exists and 4-H is not able to communicate the positive effects it's having on the lives of young people? And it's that experience that led Mary to deciding to take her time as a researcher and start to develop what we now see and what we now have as the thriving model. It was Mary's desire to help the 4-H movement tell its story and demonstrate the impact that 4-H has on young people. So before I go any further, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to just watch a little quick introductory video to the 4-H thriving model.
4-H programs have engaged young people in learning and growing for over a century. But our work is about much more than a club, camp, or after-school program. It's about helping youth thrive now and in the future. The science behind 4-H is positive youth development, a strengths-based, comprehensive approach to promoting learning and development. We use this approach to ensure our programs have positive, measurable impacts on the social, emotional, behavioral, and cognitive development of our youth.
It's a leave nothing to chance process where, as 4-H educators, we don't just passively rely on the experiences of our programs to impact youth. Instead, we intentionally create high-quality settings to promote optimal development. So, how do we make sure PYD is part of every 4-H opportunity? We make decisions and build our programs based on the 4-H thriving model.
This research-based model includes 4 key ingredients that make up a high-quality 4-H program and that help you thrive in equitable and inclusive ways. These ingredients include Sparks, providing a place where youth can explore and spark their personal interests. Belonging, creating an environment where all youth belong, where they feel welcome and physically and emotionally safe. Relationships, fostering positive, supportive, and empowering relationships between youth and adults, and among youth and their peers. And engagement, promoting active engagement where youth have a voice and are challenged and encouraged to pursue their own learning and growth.
How do we ensure youth thrive? In addition to providing high-quality settings, we also need to intentionally support the social-emotional learning that helps youth develop critical life skills. These skills are summarized in these 7 thriving indicators. These indicators include growth mindset, openness to challenge and discovery, sense of hope and purpose, pro-social orientation, transcendent awareness, positive emotions, and self-regulation through goal setting and management.
Youth who experience high-quality 4-H program settings with activities that promote the 7 thriving indicators achieve positive developmental outcomes, including academic motivation and success, social competence, high personal standards, connection with others, personal responsibility, and leadership and civic engagement.
Youth who achieve positive developmental outcomes are more likely to also achieve long-term wellness and success marked by vocational or academic success, civic engagement, employability and economic stability, and happiness and well-being.
In short, PYD is made possible when we intentionally use research-based methods to plan and implement our 4-H programs to help youth thrive. With this approach, we can offer high-quality developmental settings in which all youth feel empowered, build critical life skills, and have the opportunity to reach their fullest potential.
switch back to my presentation now. We'll pick up where we left off.
Leslie, I'm wondering really quickly, we just got a question in the chat, and I have the same question actually, because this is the first time I've seen this video and it's fantastic. But we have a leader wondering if there is the possibility to access this video through like the 4-H Canada website, or is it up on YouTube? They're hoping to use it as like an information presentation for like attracting new members and engaging with families and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can definitely share the link. It is available on YouTube. I'm going to save the rest of the question in terms of using it in a promotional sense until the end of the presentation, if that's okay. But I would like to come back to that.
Okay,
if
perfect.
That's okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, where were we?
Leslie, if I can interrupt you again really quickly. Sorry, we have a question in the chat, and perhaps you'll go through this in a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
But Lisa and Diane are wondering so in the youth thriving section of this model, there's a point in there called transcendent awareness, and they're wondering what that means within the context of youth in the 4-H program. Could you give us a little bit more information on that particular?
Yeah, we will. Let me start. Let me just find my spot in my notes where we're going to pick back up again. And I'll make sure I address that.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about all the technical issues. One would think that at this point we should be comfortable with 2 screens and sharing. Clearly, my age is showing as I try and do all of this. Okay, so we watched the video on the thriving model. What the thriving model does is it describes the process of youth development in 4-H. Now, unlike the 4-H Canada formula, this is a model. So remember we said earlier that a model can predict, and we think of it as an if-then relationship. It predicts why something happens. So if we look at the thriving model, if we do and provide what we see at the bottom there in the soil or the developmental context, if we provide the sparks, belonging, relationships, and engagement, and we plant that little seed of a new 4-H member, then we should start to see the stem grow as that youth starts to grow and develop through 4-H programming. And then if we provide everything that we see in that youth thriving, they'll continue to grow and develop further. And they sprout these beautiful leaves that we see in the developmental context. And if we continue to develop and support what's in the developmental context, then we should have youth that grow into thriving adults and that bloom into these beautiful flowers. So I'll come back down to talk about just very quickly some of those things in the youth thriving section. So to address the question that we had, so growth mindset, hopefully this is something that individuals are aware of. This is being open to opportunity, thinking that we have potential. It's that yet mindset. I may not be able to build a circuit yet. Rather than seeing our abilities as something that are fixed and that can never develop. Openness to challenge and discovery is very similar. We want youth, and we want to encourage youth to be open to the possibilities that exist, to the challenges around them, and to discovering new opportunities. Hopeful purpose is the kind of orientation that and recognition that someone's life has purpose, even though they might not recognize or know or have a sense of what that purpose is. It's that hopeful sense that my life has value to those that I interact with and to my global community. Transcendent awareness. This can be thought of as something bigger beyond oneself. It could be a spiritual connection. It doesn't have to be. It could be a connection to, you know, the earth. But it's a connection to something that's bigger beyond oneself and the people in their lives. Positive emotions, again, is sort of connected, very connected to well-being. Not to say that the individual has to have, you know, is only experiencing the emotions and feelings that they like, because that's not a good thing. But it's being able to positively manage their emotions and their feelings. And then goal setting and management, I think, is fairly self-explanatory. So again, we see this model as an if-then statement. If we provide all of these things and we're supporting the development, then we get youth who become adults who have those 4 long-term outcomes. And what I really love about those long-term outcomes is if you look closely, they align with the 4 H's: head, heart, hands, and health. And that's what we're striving for. Okay, let's see. Okay, what we're going to do next is a little activity to compare. Oh, there we go. To compare and align the 4-H Canada PYD formula with the Thriving model. I recognize that they are different. We talked about that one is a formula and one is a model, but these two things do align quite well. So one of the handouts that Lauren shared with you in advance was a 2-page document that gave you a copy of each of these. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and what we're going to do is just break into some small breakout rooms just for a few minutes. And what I'd like you to do is try and decide where the formula, if you had to sort of chop up the 4-H Canada PYD formula, where would those pieces fit on that Thriving model? Okay, so Lauren, I think based on the number that we have in the group, probably 2 breakout rooms would work.
Okay.
And let's say like maybe 5 minutes.
Sure, that sounds good, Leslie. I will get those set up here in just a moment. Going to pause recording.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Hopefully you had some nice discussion. Is there anyone, we'll just open it to the entire floor rather than necessarily individual rooms, but is there anyone that wants to share very briefly what they talked about and where they aligned the 4-H Canada model with the Thriving, or the the formula with the model? Let's do it that way.
I vote Carol Lewis. She had a really great analogy of bringing all the pieces together. Carol, if you don't mind sharing it.
Oh, because I kind of was inspired by your mention that the formula is essentially a list of ingredients to use to build a cake. If that the process of the recipe. So you have all of the ingredients that are in the formula, and the ingredients have to get gathered into a mise en place. And so that's the roots in the beginning of the stem. Then you put the dry ingredients with the dry and the wet ingredients with the wet, and you get prepared to create the final product, or to begin the experiment that will create the final product, because not all baking is a success. And that's kind of like the leaves and the beginning of the bud for the flower. And then once everything's together and the cake is baked, you have the flower, you have the finished product, you have the thing that you can be proud of, and it can be decorated any way you want, but it cannot be broken apart again into the individual parts that made it. It is now a full and complete item on its own, new and different from the individual ingredients, but you need every single one of those individual ingredients in order for the cake to turn out properly. So that was kind of my analogy, was that you can break the pieces apart and attack each individual ingredient on its own, but they all have to be combined together in order to have the result of the have your cake and eat it too.
That's amazing, Carol. Thank you for sharing that. I love that visualization. Anyone else want to share? Yeah, Shannon.
It's almost like the sum is greater than the parts. And Carol's analogy is really great. And we have all of those parts of the honeycomb. And those parts are at the final level are included in that, but the sum is a much greater, bigger, and beautiful picture.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's it's not trying to align these two things. Hopefully you see similarities where language is similar and ideas are similar. It's not a perfect fit, and it doesn't have to be. Generally speaking, those core elements align really well with the developmental context, or that soil at the bottom. Our outer shapes, those darker green assets, kind of fall between the developmental outcomes and youth thriving, and then definitely those long-term outcomes are responsible, caring, and contributing leaders. So they do connect really well. It is not a perfect fit, nor do I think it needs to be, but hopefully you found some points of discussion that were really helpful. I'm going to reshare my screen here. And I think I figured out how to do this so much better this time. And we'll pick up where we were. Okay, can everyone see that developmental context slide? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes, and we'll keep going. So there is an awful lot of information in both the 4-H Canada PYD formula and the thriving model, more than we can cover in one presentation. So for today, I'd just like to take a little bit of time focusing on the developmental context, which aligns with our key elements in the formula. I really want you to think about the developmental context and the 4-H Canada's essential elements as the program that you have. If we look at the thriving model, our young person is the seed. And this is the area of the model or the formula where, as a volunteer leader, you can have a huge impact and set that youth up for future thriving. Chances are you're already doing these things in your clubs and in your programming. You don't necessarily need to do them differently. The key and what's important is doing them with intention. We want them to be done in a purposeful way so that they're happening every time rather than by happy accident. The developmental context in the thriving model includes 4 ingredients for high quality programs that help you thrive in equitable and inclusive ways. The 4 ingredients of the developmental context are sparks, belonging, relationships, and engagement. And we see these align with what's in the center of our PYD formula. Sparks are found through the exploration and discovery of experiential education, which is 4-H Canada's Learn to Do by Doing approach. Belonging is supported by providing a safe and inclusive environment. Positive relationships are modeled and developed with caring adults that lead and deliver the 4-H program. And finally, engagement happens when all of the first 3 aspects are in place and fostered at all opportunities. So starting with sparks. Sparks are an important part of the intrinsic motivation in the life of anybody, but in particular, a young person. It's that drive that comes from within us. Sparks give youth meaning and are their reasons for getting up in the morning. They're connected to a young person's sense of identity, their sense of hope, and purpose in the world. Sparks are especially important during adolescence. So you can think about what your personal spark or sparks might be for a moment. They might be tied to your career, but they might not be. And that's an important part of sparks. They don't have to be tied to a career or what we want to do in our future. Maybe your spark is an outlet for you. Sparks help us further our skills. And I want you to think about how you feel when you're engaged with your sparks. All of that, what you're thinking about and what you're feeling, is true for youth as well. Our role is to help youth identify their sparks and then connect with them with 4-H programming that fits to what their spark is. We should be talking to members about their sparks when we see them. So a spark conversation might go something like this. Hey, little 4-H'er, I've really noticed the last few meetings that you get really excited when we talk about new farm technology. Can you tell me about that? And then this dialogue continues and we provide and leave space for the youth to share their thoughts and their voice with us. We might come back with something like, I think coming up with new innovations is pretty cool too. Maybe you'd like to try this STEM project club activity where you'd get to try inventing your own machine. What do you think about that? So what we're doing here is helping this youth identify that, hey, actually, I am really excited about innovating or being creative and inventing things. We're helping make that connection between their spark and an opportunity for them to use it and develop it. We're also affirming and letting them know that what they're thinking about and what they're feeling is okay, and it's really important to us. That's also going to translate into fostering strong relationships. 4-H is the perfect place for youth to explore their sparks because the program can be built around their interests and their spark. Our programming is not prepackaged, and that's something that is unique about it, is that it can shift and change and flow based on the youth that we're working with and what their sparks are. So next is belonging. And belonging is creating an environment where all youth feel like they belong. Some research completed by Eccles and Gutman in 2002 identified 8 program quality indicators. And when these indicators are present, we know that we're doing our programming well. The indicators help support and ensure that we're fostering a sense of belonging. So the first of those indicators is physical and psychological safety. And I also want to add that this really should and needs to include identity safety as well. Appropriate structure. So this doesn't mean following Robert's Rules of Orders perfectly. What it means is that there is a plan, that the plan is shared with young people, and that there are clear expectations that are also communicated to youth. Third is supportive relationships. And this is our youth-adult partnership. Mary Arnold also articulated this separately in the developmental context where she talks about relationships, which really just further identifies the importance that they play. Number 4 is opportunities to belong. And here is where we have belonging called out specifically. Research shows that if youth don't feel like they belong, that they won't continue and they won't return to our programs. And I think that just is that much more important that we keep this top of mind because we do want them to return. We do want them to experience all that 4-H has to offer. Number 5 is positive social norms. 4-H does this really well. We see this when older members teach younger members what it means to be a 4-H'er and when they model positive behaviors and attitudes for them. It's how we treat each other in 4-H. It's our positive ways of interacting, and it's also supported by the 4-H Canada Code of Conduct. Number 6 is support for efficacy and mattering. So if a young person is going to do well in the program, that the program needs to support the youth and where they are and what they bring to the program. Young people need to have a sense that they matter in the program, as well as a sense of competence that they bring to the program before they participate in it. So this, again, connects back to our positive approach and viewing youth as already having assets when they come to us in 4-H. Number 7 is opportunities for skill building. And again, this is something that 4-H does really well. Not only are we providing opportunities for youth to build skills, we do it through the powerful means of experiential learning, which again is our do, reflect, apply approach. And number 8 is integration of family, school, and community. And again, this last one is pretty clear. And again, it's something that 4-H does really well. We are integrating and including families in what 4-H is, and we make connections to our communities and educational systems in a variety of different ways. Okay, developmental relationships. These are more about this. Let me start that again. Developmental relationships are about more than just showing up and being physically present in the life of a young person. They're about fostering supportive and empowering relationships. They include both youth-adult partnerships and relationships, as well as youth-to-youth relationships. There's 5 qualities that promote developmental relationships. The first one is expressing care. This can look different in different situations, but some key things are, do we know the names of all the youth? Are we using their names? Are we welcoming them? Do we show that we care for each individual and get to know them individually and who they are and what's important to them? The second is providing support. And support needs to include individual support. We should know what an individual needs to get the most from the 4-H program and ensure that we do everything we can to provide what they need to participate and to be successful. Number 3 is challenging growth. When we work with youth, we should be keeping in mind where their zone of comfort is and then challenging them to go just beyond that. And that's known as their stretch zone. We should be scaffolding opportunities in ways that make sense to that individual youth. So if we ask a youth during a meeting, hey, would you be okay taking notes for this meeting? That youth might say, great, I'd love to give that a shot. And they jump right in. The next youth that we ask may have a deer in headlights kind of look on their face. And what that's telling us is that we have taken them far beyond their stretch zone. That's too much. So what we need to do is scaffold that. We need to take them step by step to be able to do this task and challenge their growth incrementally. So maybe for the first time, it looks like, okay, maybe that's not feeling comfortable for you. What if you just watch someone else take notes tonight and you can see what that involves? The next time, maybe it's supporting that person and they're really contributing. The next time, maybe it's them taking the lead with the support of someone else. And the final step is them feeling confident enough to take the notes all on their own. So we're breaking it down and building youth and getting them into that stretch zone incrementally based on what makes sense for that individual youth. Number 4 is sharing power. And this is the focus of our youth-adult partnerships. It happens when we make and leave space for youth voice, choice, and decisions, when we honor and respect youth as equal partners in the 4-H program, then we're sharing power. And number 5 is expanding possibilities. This is how we help youth see away from where they are today to where they want to be in the future. And we expand possibilities for them by introducing them to new opportunities. Finally, youth engagement. Youth engagement is what drives the thriving. Engagement involves youth voice and allowing youth to contribute in purposeful and meaningful ways to them. There are 3 considerations when we talk about youth engagement. The first one is duration, and this is the length of time a youth is involved in our program. The longer the duration, the bigger the impact and the more opportunity for long-term outcomes a youth has. The second is intensity. And here we're considering how engaged a youth is. Do they show up for just a few meetings a year, or are they attending all the meetings and events? Again, the more opportunity we have to engage with that youth, the bigger the impact and the more outcomes we'll see. And finally is breadth. And here we're looking at how broadly a youth is participating in the 4-H program. Are they participating in as many opportunities available to them as possible? Are they participating in club, regional, provincial, national events? Now, keep in mind, we don't want youth to take on more than they're ready for or they want to participate in. But again, the more breadth, the more opportunity for better outcomes. Okay. There was another handout that Lauren shared with you that looks something like this. I know we're getting tight on time, so we're gonna take maybe only about 7 minutes in breakout rooms. And what I'd like you to do is talk for a couple minutes with your group about some suggested actions you can take to implement some of these developmental contexts that we talked about. And rather than having you all take on all 4 of these things, what I'm going to suggest is that group 1 looks at the first 2. So if group 1 can talk about how will you foster sparks and how will you promote belonging, and group 2 can talk about how will you support developmental relationships and how will you encourage engagement and youth voice. That way, when we come back together as a group, we can share maybe just 1 or 2 ideas from each, and we'll collectively all have suggestions across the 4 different areas. Okay, so group 1, you're going to do the first 2 in the table, and group 2, you're going to do the second 2.
Awesome. Okay, let me ask a little bit.
Okay. All right. So some final thoughts on everything that we've talked about today. Dr. Richard Lerner from Tufts University stated, all models are wrong and all models are useful. Now, don't worry too much that we've talked about models and formulas today, and then I throw this out there. What he's saying is that models, unfortunately, aren't perfect, like a lot in life. However, in relation to what we do in 4-H, models of youth development are very useful in helping us describe how youth development works, the magic of 4-H. If we don't know how things are happening and why things are happening in the programs that we're running, then we can't know how the good work is happening to achieve the outcomes that we want to be achieving. The model of any program has to fit with what is actually happening in the program. This is true for the 4-H Thriving model, and it's also true for the 4-H Canada PYD formula. Sparks are at the heart of what's happening in 4-H. What are youth interested in, and how can 4-H help them explore this? Belonging, developmental relationships, and engagement are key ingredients that are both unique and important. It's the process of thriving that makes the 4-H thriving model unique from other PYD models. And it's how we can not only better tell the 4-H story, but how we can ensure that we're supporting youth to be set up for success into the future and that they are thriving. I'm going to skip the reflection, but I would challenge you to take some time to think about the session on your own after the call today, things that you'll take away from it, questions that you might still have, things that you'd like to know more about and that you're excited about from the session. If you have questions, comments, you can certainly reach out to me at any time, and I can drop my email in the chat. Or you can reach out to Lauren, and she can certainly connect us. If you want to use your device to scan the QR code that's on the screen, and I'll stop sharing my screen in just a minute, and then I'll drop it in the chat as well. This will take you to an evaluation, which surprisingly will not look that different at all from the assessment that you completed at the beginning of our time together today. What I'm looking or what I'm hoping to do with this information is not just to be able to measure how useful sessions like this are in helping you understand information like PYD, but it's also an opportunity for me to understand what else we can do at 4-H Canada to better support you and equip you as volunteer leaders to do the amazing things that you're doing in your programming with youth. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'll drop the link to the evaluation in case you weren't able to get the QR code to work. I'll drop that in the chat. And I will also put my email address in the chat for anyone who maybe has questions after today. There's the link. And certainly there's a place for you to add things that you're thinking about or you want to know more about in the evaluation, but you can certainly reach out to me at any time. Okay, and there's my email. So I will give you some time to complete that, but I did say to Lauren, I recognize that we are over time, and I apologize for my technical issues that contributed to that. But thank you so much for taking time to be here today. I do think that spending time learning together is so valuable, and I really enjoyed being able to share some PYD information with you. I am happy to answer questions that you may have, and I'm going to start by addressing the question from earlier about sharing the video. I don't want to say don't share it, but I would say please use please put some thought into who you're sharing it with and the context you're sharing it under, only because 4-H Canada at this point in time is not following we're not following the thriving model exactly the way it's described in the video. And I think we just have to be careful, especially with individuals who are new to 4-H or families we may be welcoming into 4-H, that we don't want them to think that we're sharing one thing and we're following something else. And because this is quite theoretical information to some individuals, I think we could quite quickly confuse them, and we want them to be set up for success when they join 4-H. So I think there's great information in there, but I would just say, maybe be thoughtful about who and when you're sharing it with individuals. And I will find the link for the video, and then I will share that in the chat as well, where you can access it.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. We're so lucky to have been able to host you today and learn from you and listen to some of your knowledge and expertise around this. Certainly is helpful. And I know for me, that was the first time I've heard of the thriving model. So very fascinating to learn more about it. I will, just recognize again, like we are a little bit over time. If you need to scoot off the call, that's okay. But if you have any burning questions, we'll just keep the floor open now. I am also going to share in the chat, so hopefully things don't get too lost here. I'm going to share a link to the 4-HBC website that lists all of the other series that we have coming up, because we've had a couple questions about that, as well as we have another generic evaluation that won't take long, but we also want to collect some information about how we can offer future sessions for leaders. So please take a couple of moments to fill that out as well.
Leslie, does 4-H Canada have a plan to kind of make adjustments to the 4-H thriving model to create one that is more centered around the Canadian national 4-H aspects? Because obviously we're utilizing a US national thriving model. Is there potentially like future plans to create something that can be more ground level, that can be shared at a national Canadian level, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Okay.
And I do appreciate that the thriving model was created and developed and is currently being used in a US context, and that 4-H looks different in a US context than it does in Canada. So two parts to my answer. One, I think that there is, because of the way the model and the formula align, there are things that we can use now. And certainly some of that is some of the research that's continually being done that uses the thriving model as the basis for measuring outcomes because of that connection. In terms of whether 4-H Canada will adopt it or redevelop our formula to be more in line with that, I don't have a good answer for that. I think that is a good question that will most certainly come up when we have a new CEO. But given the fact that we don't have a permanent CEO at this point, I think that will all probably come in due course. So all that to say, stay tuned.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Well, great. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. I'm seeing lots of praise, which is great. It sounds like this session was helpful for new leaders, especially. So really happy to hear that, everybody. And like Leslie said, feel free to save her email, but you can also connect with me if you have any further questions about this. And I'm sure the moment that 4-H Canada does adopt the thriving model, they'll have lots of advertisements and promotional material that'll come out. So yeah, something to look forward to.